Magic reveals itself to those who remember where to look for it. This is Magic Hour, and I'm your host, Taylor Page. If you are interested in deepening your own intuitive connection with your angels and team of guiding light around you, I cannot recommend my Be Your Own Angelic Intuitive workshop enough. It is a 3-part workshop series teaching you to connect to your angels and working with oracle cards. It's good for all levels of development, and each student can email me one question about the subject matter per lesson. I've had so much amazing feedback on this workshop in the ways that it has changed people's lives and helps them live in alignment with their highest timeline and feel rooted in their own trust in themselves and in their guides. And so if you're interested, go to angelsandamethyst.com in the workshops tab, and code 333 gives $33 off. Welcome back to Magic Hour, everyone. I'm your host, Taylor Page.
Hello, everyone. I'm Claire, your producer. Thank you so much for joining us.
So excited to be back with our second episode of listener questions. But before we get into that, I want to talk about this idea that's been coming up in a lot of my readings. And this happens sometimes where people in the collective, it happens a lot, where people are going through similar things at a similar time. And I get like a string of clients with similar circumstances and similar messages. And it's actually really funny and sort of interesting the way that works out. But this idea of expanding your perspective keeps coming up. So many people are only seeing life through the lens of expectations or routine or the regular neck of the woods of their own consciousness. But the message that I get is there is this whole other flip side that the world has to offer with so many gifts in it. And I just wanted to start the podcast today with this invitation to do something completely out of your comfort zone or completely out of your routine, or learn from another person's point of view, because we're getting so stuck in these rigid ruts of consciousness that are keeping us from the full 360 depths of the magic that's possible for us in this life. And so I feel like travel to a place in the world you wouldn't have gone to, or make friends with somebody different. Like in the last reading I did, her angels were like, you need to take a comedy class. And it was this lady who was very serious and in her head and anxious and worried. And they were saying, like, you've forgotten to laugh. Like, there's so much lightness and laughter available in the world. Like, you need to go take a stand-up class just to see life again through the perspective of finding the light instead of finding what there is to be worried about. And so I think if there's something that is just a complete 180 for you, do it. Because it creates new neural pathways in your brain. It expands your idea of what's possible. And you start to realize that we put our own limitations on life. Like, I notice this with love life readings so often, where people will be like, okay, these two guys like me. Can you feel into their energy and tell me which one is right? And their angels are like, neither of them are right. And they're not the only two people in the world. Like, there are billions of people in the world. And so we hyper focus on these like touch points, whether it's stories of identity or comfort zones or things we've always done. And I just get this message now that life is so interesting. There is so much to do and learn and explore in this life. And if you're feeling stuck or heavy, you're perhaps just looking at a blank wall when right behind you in another direction is a completely open, magical landscape. So there's something here about just expanding your perspective and looking in a new direction that really wanted to be shared.
I love that. That's such a beautiful synchronicity too, because I did a reading for myself maybe yesterday or the day before. And from the Mystical Shaman deck, shout out.
Colette Baron Reed, right?
Yes, I really love that deck. And I pulled the card, The Child. And the message there is all about looking at the world with that childlike innocence and curiosity and play.
Yes.
And kind of doing away with the stories and narratives that we've been hanging on to and defining ourselves by. And I was just chatting with some friends too about this idea of like doing something new, even if you don't enjoy the experience or don't get out of the experience what you expect to. The very act of doing something new teaches you so much, even just the lesson that I can do new things, that I can do something scary or take a risk, and that I made it to the other side. And so then the next time there's an opportunity to do something new, I'll feel bolder, I'll feel more empowered to try it because I've already tried it. And you just get so much out of taking those risks and leaps and trying new things.
Yeah, it builds self-trust. And it's so true. The child archetype is so important because, I always go on and on about the inner child on this podcast, but it's true. You don't see children overthinking things, especially young children. It's like everything is exciting and new and ready to explore, even like textures of things and tastes of things. It's like to get really micro on the micro level. There's just so much wonder to explore in like every area. And I think sometimes we forget just how magical it is being a human in a world designed for a physical body.
It's so true. I mean, you see children, especially very young children, and they're literally exploring the world with their mouth. I mean, everything goes in their mouth. They're licking it, they're touching it, they're tasting it, sometimes to a bad degree where you have to really watch them. But, the act of having a delicious strawberry, I mean, for them can be this life-changing moment. And for us, because we've had strawberries so many times, we can kind of bypass the pleasure of that moment. And how often are we doing that while we're just in our mind worrying and stressing? How can we tap more into that wonder of, the light filtering through the trees, the taste of a beautiful fruit, the sound of our friends' laughter when we say something funny? Like the gifts around us are so bountiful.
Yes.
And all we have to do is just shift our attention to them.
Absolutely. And it just brings up this phrase in my mind, like, don't get jaded to the magical experience of being a human, because being a human is pure magic. And since one of the biggest objectives of this podcast is to remind you of magic, let's start here. Where have you become jaded to the everyday miracles all around you? And how can you shift into a place of greater gratitude and awe for them? Because it truly, every single day is a miracle. The way everything in our body works together is a miracle. And I think sometimes we look at everything outside of ourselves to find magic, when if we can't recognize the miracles and magic of our everyday existence, then it will be really hard to see miracles and magic outside, which kind of transitions me to this other concept I've been thinking a lot about. And I know a lot of people in this community are artists or entrepreneurs or healers or people whose businesses hinge on them and their creative or spiritual or energetic output. And I think this rediscovery of magic, getting out of ruts of doing things the same way, is an essential part of the strength training and endurance training for that career path, sort of similar to the artist way idea of an artist date, where you take yourself out on a date to stimulate your inner artist and creative. And that's a really important part for us creatives, for us empaths, for the people whose business rely on our creative flow and flow with spirit. It's so essential to get out of your comfort zone and your ruts and stay inspired and stay curious and stay growing. And that's how we fill up our cups as spiritual or creative entrepreneurs, is shaking things up, seeing from another perspective.
And I love that you brought up the artist dates, because that was, I loved the artist way, and the artist dates for me were maybe the most powerful part about it. Because not only did it give you that space to connect into the magic within you and give you that time and space with yourself, but for me, it was really a connection to self. I mean, we'll make time with our friends and make that a special adventure, or with a lover or family. we will go on a date with those people and make that such a special thing. But to do that for yourself, to take yourself on a date, it was just such a beautiful, empowering thing to do. And to be on your own adventure where only you get to decide, what will we do next? Or do I want to stop and smell this flower or pop into this bookstore? It was such a deep connection to self and the magic within me, like you were just talking about.
Yes, and that brings me to solo travel. Like some of the biggest leaps and bounds of spiritual growth and self-development I have ever had in my life have been through solo travel, because it is so centered on self-reliance, getting clear on what your needs are, and it's just so intimate going on a trip by yourself, and it really takes you out of your routine, again, getting out of routines and seeing things from new ways. And it asks, who am I really without my job, without my routines, without the people around me and the environment around me that I know how to show up in? And solo travel, I always like joke that this really intense camping trip I took is what turned me into a woman, like back in 2019. But solo trips are really exactly what we're talking about here, on crack.
I just could not agree with that more. I'm like a fanatic about solo travel. I've had the immense privilege to be able to do that several times. And it is such a space for growth for yourself. And also kind of ties into what we were talking about on the last solo episode about stepping into the unknown. I mean, when you are alone traveling, you are so much more open to the spontaneous gifts that come your way than when you are in a space where you're like, I'm with this person and we're doing this thing. Because then you can kind of shut yourself off to what's happening around you because you have your plan and you have your person or people. And when you're alone, I mean, the people I've met, the random encounters I've had, the detours I've taken that I probably would have completely missed if I was doing the plan I had in my mind with this other person. So I couldn't agree more. Solo travel, even just a day trip, take yourself, for a drive and, drive up the coast or drive to the woods or wherever you are, even just that short of a time with yourself on the open road, going where your heart takes you is just such a gift.
Absolutely. And I think also bringing the mindset, like the version of self, and this actually just came up in a reading too. This girl I was reading for, it was basically saying like your partner isn't in your physical location, and the physical location was her hometown, and in her hometown she was this version of self that wasn't as conducive or open to love, and when she was traveling and out and about she was. And so the message was, how can you take that engaged, heart-led, open, present tourist mindset and bring it into your everyday life, because it's completely two different people. And so I think if you can't travel, then how can you bring that tourist mindset? If this was your first time in your town or your city, what would you recommend people to do? Where would you recommend them to go? It's like, I live in LA and I have for like decades, and I haven't seen a bunch of the stuff that tourists go to see. You know what I mean? And so I think we, again, become so jaded to the magic of life. And it's almost like a relationship where in the beginning, everything is fun and new. And why is that? It's because it's all new and you're doing things, you're planning dates, you're thoughtful, you're staying present. And then slowly after time, it becomes routine and mundane and jaded. And that is truly the death of magic. And it's really hard to keep up with it, but we have to make a conscious effort to look at things constantly with fresh eyes, because as humans, we are always growing and changing. Our partners are always growing and changing. Our environments are always growing and changing. And if we don't continue to make an effort to look at these things with fresh eyes, we will fall out of love with them because we won't even know the different directions that we've grown.
That was so well put. I love that so much. And it's a really great reminder for me in the moment I'm in right now.
I'm so glad. And yeah, I think when Ari and I first started dating, it was so exciting because we would drive up Sepulveda Boulevard and watch the sunset out of the car. And we would, take our dog to the beach and like all of these things. And then life gets fast. Our businesses grew. We have so much responsibility, but we still try to make conscious times to enjoy the little things and to continue to learn who we are every day because it's always changing. And so do that. Have a tourist mindset with everything, because aren't tourists just the happiest people ever? Tourists don't care if they're in embarrassing fanny packs and like shoes. They're just living their best life. Tourists don't care if they're being judged. Of course, be respectful to the environment. Don't litter. I'm not saying that part of like tourists. I'm not saying be a parasite, but tourists are just living their best life in this lit up way. And why can't we bring an element of that to our everyday life, no matter where we are?
Yes, here's to that. I love that, Taylor.
Cheers to being a tourist. So should we get into some listener questions?
Yes, let's do it. We have so many amazing listener questions. Thank you again, everyone, for sending them to us. Please continue to do so. We love receiving them. We love receiving your feedback and your 5-star reviews. It's just wonderful to hear your engagement. So this question is from Meryl. I've had a few very powerful spiritual experiences this past year, but both were when I had taken a microdose of either mushrooms or a half of a CBD THC gummy for sleep. I'm talking the smallest amount. But for some reason, it feels like it lifts a veil and is a catalyst for the connection. I'm curious how I can tap into this deeper connection without any substance.
Ooh, thank you for this question, Meryl. So the first thing I want to say is that indigenous cultures for generations have used plant medicine to have these transcendent experiences connecting with spirit. And in my readings, sometimes plants come through as plant guides. Just like we have animal guides, there are plant guides as well. And two of the most common that I see, actually three of the most common that I see, are roses, sunflowers, and mushrooms. Those are the three that come into my readings the most often, and they all have different reasons. And so I like where you ended your question with, I want to be able to have this connection without the substances or the plants guiding me or helping me. How can I do this? So this shows me that in your waking everyday life, there's a maybe crown chakra block or holding on to control or overthinking or worrying, so that as soon as these plant medicine guides come in, you can kind of exhale and actually be an open channel to receive. And this is very similar to people who can only get messages in their dreams. It's not that you can't get messages that you're awake when you're awake. It's your guides being like, the barriers are down, proceed, the barriers are down. And so this actually reminds me of an experience that I've had with marijuana, which when I first smoked weed at a very young age, I had a really bad experience with it. I totally got paranoid. I had I got sick. It was just like a really bad experience. But then after my mom passed, I was kind of going through my own health journey, and grief, as you know, can be a catalyst for worse physical symptoms because of all of the stress it takes on the body. And I was in a very low place with grief, with pain, with a lot of different layers of heaviness and intensity. And I took a weed tonic medicinally. And the first time I took it, I was such a newbie at it. I took way too much. I'm talking way too much. Ari had to come home from work. I thought I was dying on the bathroom floor. He just set me on the bed, and I just stared blankly at a wall for 8 hours.
Oh my God, I'm dying.
I know. And it was so crazy. And we always joke because Ari is during Monday mornings is his crazy time. That is when everything's hitting from over the weekend. And it was Monday at 9 a.m. And I was like, I'm having a heart attack, babe, come home. And he was like, oh my God. So with this experience, at the time that I was super, super overdosed, opposite of microdose, I just kept taking more because I wasn't feeling it. And then it all hit at once. It was just a newbie move. So in that time, I saw this spirit of marijuana coming to me. And it was this mist-like substance that was green and black and purple. And it was swirling all around me. And it basically said, you actually need my medicine now. It said, before when you tried to take me, it was for the wrong reasons and you had a bad reaction. But now you need this medicine and I'm here to support you through the time that you need. And it was the first time I had ever spoken to a plant spirit, which was very, very interesting. So that being said, And in my readings, mushrooms come through as like, hey, you're in a really heavy place. Let me help lift you up and assist you and get some momentum going. So plants will work with us. And I can't say I'm an expert in plant medicine. I've never done ayahuasca or anything like that, but I know there's such a rich tradition of plants as medicine, and each plant has their own spirit and identity and what they can help us for. I mean, the whole earth is designed for our healing, and plants are no different than that. So I think if you have had these experiences and it's after a microdose, it shows that these forces and intuitive pulls are already knocking at your door. And this is the little thing that just helped you loosen the reins and relax. So I would recommend, breath work, grounding, doing things to de-stress and come back to the present and let go a little bit. For some reason, I'm feeling intuitively a connection to perfectionism. And so know that there is no right answer or wrong answer. I think when you're on mushrooms, especially, there's this sense of playful curiosity, like mushrooms make everything more cheerful. And so I think there's something here about leaning into the playful aspect of it and letting everything else go, because this just shows that your guides have been knocking and this was their little in. And what we don't want to happen is that you feel like you have to do a substance to connect, because sometimes on this path, we can have superstitions or crutches or things we think we have to do. Like, I have to hold this crystal and I have to face north and I have to breathe this particular way. Like, all of that is superstition. None of that is true. So don't start creating the story of, if I don't do this, then I can't connect, because that's also not true. Claire, anything you want to add to this conversation?
Yeah, for sure. I know that I am someone who enjoys exploring these types of substances. And I think particularly with something like psilocybin with mushrooms, what is really beautiful about that type of substance, and they are doing unbelievable trials with psilocybin, with MDMA, exploring the health benefits and emotional health benefits for things like PTSD, for things like alcoholism, OCD. And it's really amazing the effects these things can have on you. And of course, you want to do it in a safe way, and you want to make sure you're taking the correct dose.
Yes.
Because obviously you can take too much and then it takes you off of the healing journey with it. But what I love so much about it is, unlike an experience, I would say, like with alcohol, where you might change your mood or change your vibration, but the next day you might not really remember it, or you might not have felt present to it. Something that's really beautiful about mushrooms is that when you are having the experience, it opens up your mind and your connection to a new way of looking at things, and can literally create new neural pathways, new neural grooves in your brain that you still hang on to after the experience has passed. So in regards to the question and your answer, that letting go of the perfectionism or the control was perhaps something standing in the way of a deeper intuitive connection, and having the experience on the mushrooms helped open you up to that. And it's a feeling you'll remember, a new neural groove you've created. And in these studies, they show sometimes people will have one or two or three experiences like that and be completely cured of PTSD, or
Wow.
completely able to it's amazing what they're able to achieve. So I think knowing that just because I was able to connect deeper doesn't mean I need the substance to connect deeper. The substance showed me a way to connect deeper that is always available to me. I just perhaps didn't have the eyes to see it until this substance helped me see it. And now I've seen the way, and I can connect back into that even when I'm not on the substance. So I think it can just be a really amazing tool to opening our brains in new ways, to looking at life in a different way, to connecting more fully to the present, to what we were talking about at the top of the episode, the beauty that is all around us.
Yeah.
It can help us detach, I think, the connection of our worry thinking brain and our present moment brain, and give space between those things so that we're not caught in the worrying stress of it, and we can be more in the wonder. And so I think the fact that using that substance helped you connect deeper shows that you are absolutely able to connect deeper, that that's available to you. It wasn't the substance that did it. The substance just showed you the doorway, and now you know the path.
Yes.
So I would say lean into that and know, like you said, these things are here on this earth for us. Our brains have the synapses to connect with them so that we can open our minds deeper. So yeah, I think they go hand in hand.
I agree. I think that's so beautiful. And a friend of ours was sharing basically a download he got years ago where mushrooms were what helped apes progress humanity and like have consciousness shifts. So that's such an interesting idea too, as like that being a consciousness expander and elevator for humanity as a whole. And that's a really interesting theory that when he was talking to me about that, it blew my mind. But I want to comment on something that you said that I really liked, which was it shows you the path. Because in mediumship, if you lose a link with someone that you were connecting with and then you drop it, you still can center on what that person felt like and you remember them feeling like, and you can rebuild the link that way. And so, if anything, mushrooms are kind of the same, or certain plant medicine is the same, where if you're in an experience, take a present moment to say, how do I feel right now? What is the energy of this? Is there a color I associate with this? Is there feeling? Am I feeling warm? Am I feeling bubbly? Am I feeling energized? Am I feeling buzzy? And then when you're not on that, meditate on that feeling. Remember what it felt like in your body and breathe into that. And it will walk you down the path that fires up the same part of your brain in that experience. And it's a little hack to get into that. I also really liked when you contrasted it with alcohol, because I think this is really, really important. First of all, I don't recommend trying to use any type of substance to control an outcome. I think there's a certain level of differentiation with going on a journey versus I'm going to take this and try to get an answer. I think it's a completely different energy that is an important distinction. But that being said, alcohol is a substance that I really don't recommend engaging with if you are trying to connect spiritually. That doesn't say you can never drink, but I'm saying don't try to drink and give yourself a reading when you're drunk or have been drinking, because alcohol really lowers your vibration and it takes you into a heavier state. Whereas we need to raise up our vibration to meet our angels halfway. And alcohol is like a depressant, and it can just put us in this place where it's ripe for our mind to fill in the blanks instead of our actual intuition. And it's also a place where we're a little bit less in control and have less spiritual discernment, and your walls are down, your boundaries are down, and it's just a place that I would not recommend opening a sacred container of connection.
Yeah, I think that's really right on. And something else you said about it that I'd like to offer too, you mentioned that early on in your life, or earlier in your life, you smoked some weed and it didn't go great.
Yeah.
And that when you had that download, the message was that you weren't doing it for the right reason.
Yeah.
And I think that can be a really important distinction, and something that I try to do when I utilize a substance like mushrooms is to set your intention for the experience. Make it an intentional connective experience. Don't just take it to feel silly, or, I mean, that's also an intention as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes, it can be there to help us lighten our mood when we're struggling to get out of, that darkness or that the anxiety. But, really doing it with intention, like I want to connect into myself in the present moment, or I want to give myself some levity and lightness in this moment because my heart is hurting, or I want to connect deeper to the earth and connect deeper to spirit, and not necessarily like doing it like, okay, I'm going to take this so that I can tap into spirit, but more setting an intention for why you are stepping into that exchange versus kind of stepping into it willy-nilly, which I think happens a lot with alcohol. We don't really use alcohol with a lot of intention.
Yes.
And I think these plants are here for us to intentionally connect deeper with ourselves and the world.
I agree. And that's so beautiful. Like Shiva Rose said in episode 107, turning to make anything a ritual, you add intention to it. So that's where you're turning this into more of a ritual container for the divine instead of just like a party, which is fine too. One other thing that I find really interesting about mushrooms, piggybacking off of what you just said about it being designed for our connection, is that when you're on them, you're not supposed to look at screens. It like totally ruins your vibe to look at screens. And I wonder if there's a deeper metaphor there of like, get back into nature, because this is actually where the joy is and the light is and everything in our brain to be positive. And I wonder if screens are a little bit more like alcohol, like a depressant, a downer, a zapper of our energy. And that's why that's like oil and water. And same with mirrors. You're not really supposed to look at mirrors either. I think there's something so magical about mushrooms being like, hey, like enough of this looking at yourself or looking inwards or looking at screens. Like, go connect with a tree, go connect with a grass, go connect with another person in a loving way. Like, there's infinite things that it's reminding us of.
Totally. I think that's so right on. And it's a funny experience when you do go to the screen when you're on a substance like that. It's like my same connection to the screen. It's different. It's like you can see the shift in your mindset in that microcosm of a moment where normally I would lean into the screen in this moment and almost disconnect from the moment with the screen.
Yes.
And when I'm on the substance, it doesn't hold the same interest to me. I'll reach for that as an instinct. And then when I do it, I'll think, I don't care about this right now.
Yes.
You know, and I've even had that experience shopping where I happened to be, strolling down the street having an experience like this and popped into a store and realized I didn't care at all about buying anything. It didn't hold the same pull to me to buy something. I more was just like, I'm good. Do I need another shirt, or am I just fine with the shirt on my back? I think that's kind of a silly example, but it shows the shift in mindset where we center back into the moment and connect to what really matters about this experience. Not escaping, not the busy mind, not materialism, but this beautiful, magical journey that we are and we are a part of.
Yeah, and it's almost like a little buzzer on everything we used to do to numb, distract, avoid, check out, disassociate. It's like, that's not having the same effect anymore. Like, this is purposeful, intentional engagement. I remember I was at like a Christmas New Year's thing, and it was a really hard time of year. I don't microdose very often, but I prefer it to drinking. I don't really drink, and if I do anything, I would just prefer to microdose mushrooms. And so, and for like emotional parts of my period pain, especially when I was in the throes of my grief, like weed tincture or marijuana tincture, because weed is such a negative like word.
I know.
Like weed, like, excuse me.
That's just them trying to get us to not connect, not to get on that tangent.
Patriarchal PR strikes again.
Yes. There's been a real demonizing of all of this stuff, acid and weed, and, it's like kind of cause to get us to shy away.
Exactly. And there's probably a big connection there between witchy stuff, magic stuff, and substances that help us connect. And I'm sure it's all swept under the rug in the same place of patriarchal PR, which is like, it's just everything that connects us to freedom, power, love, higher mindedness,
free thinking.
Yeah. And like you said, you didn't want to buy anything when you're on mushrooms.
That's right.
When we are connected to like our higher self in this joyful experience, we're not pushovers, consumers trying to fill a hole. We're in a place of self-fulfillment, which is like the opposite of what capitalism wants for us. But yeah, so I was at this party and I was having a very difficult day that day. I went to somebody's surprise engagement party, and my mom passed like 3 months before I got engaged. And we also got engaged during COVID when there couldn't really be community around you. And I was not expecting to get this emotional, but I was at this party and I saw her hug her mom and how excited her mom was that she just got proposed to. And I looked like a crazy person because this was like a friend of Ari's party and I barely knew them. And I was like sobbing hysterically. And it looked like I was like crying with happiness for them. But in reality, I was like beside myself. And I just looked at Ari. I was like, you got to get me out of here. Like, I can't do this. And I just had a complete breakdown. And at that time, I was going through a lot of family problems and I was just going through a really heavy time. And so we had a like white elephant party to get to in like 2 hours after that. We were supposed to go right there. And I was like, I can't do it in this space. Like, I need the medicine of microdosing to do this. So classic me, I'm like such a lightweight, and I took like one square, but I usually take a half, and I was like so feeling it. And like at that party, everyone was telling Ari like Taylor's amazing. Like I was having these like deep conversations with everyone. You know, usually at events with people that I don't know everyone super well, you check out on your phone, you kind of like feel a little, I was not like that at all. I was connected. I was laughing. And it was like so interesting because I accidentally looked in a mirror while I was there. There was like this kind of glass reflection, and I almost saw my grief as a tangible shadow around me. And then I saw me choose to say, it's okay, I'll feel you, but not right now. That's not the choice I'm making. And after I said that, I just like went even higher and my grief went down. And I was able to just have this like magical holiday experience that I wasn't able to have for like 3 years because of everything that had been going on for 3 years prior. And it just shows how medicinal this is. And it was such an interesting experience to see something psychically while I was on it as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. And I mean, I think I haven't had a visual representation of that, but I feel that really viscerally. It's kind of what I was talking about that like separation of these two things that feel really linked together, like my anxious thoughts and my emotional connection to them, or my pain thoughts and my emotional connection to them. And on something like mushrooms, it's like it gives it this space. I can put it aside for a second, not numb it, not escape it.
Yes.
But give some space where I can step into another energy without it just pulling me down. Because I think there's a difference between ignoring your feelings and also getting stuck in your feelings in a way where you're just bogged down by them and you're not moving anywhere.
Exactly. It's like, let's hand the microphone to another part of our consciousness for a little while.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then when we revisit, when we come down and we go back into that feeling, or it reattaches, we have new information. We've been able to take a breath. We've been able to take a beat from being in that never-ending loop of pain, thoughts, and emotion.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's super helpful. I just really quick want to shout out a couple. There's a beautiful documentary on Netflix called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan that really talks about the medicinal effects, and also Fantastic Fungi, or I guess it's fungi, which kind of kills the joke, but Fantastic Fungi on Netflix with Paul Stamets, who's like the hero of psilocybin and mushrooms. But both of those are really amazing if you're interested in exploring this in a really intentional, helpful way. They have just a lot of amazing information about ways that this is really helping people in a healthy way.
Yeah. And I think, I was someone who was very nervous about this and very much not a fan of like doing any type of drugs. And I was a lightweight and everything like that. But being thrust into like the most difficult time of my life, microdosing these substances with intention has been one of the biggest consciousness shifting tools in my toolbox that is immediate and helpful. And I literally was like diagnosed with COVID on the first Christmas Eve that my mom passed away. And then I also started my period that same day. And I was just in like the heaviest, darkest, most painful place. And like that microdose saved me. I was laughing. I was like giggling and laughing and like in a completely different place. And so there's no judgment here. I think we can, speaking for myself personally, sometimes I'm like, I have to explain why I'm doing these things, but there's no judgment here. And I think as consciousness evolves, we will remember that these plants used with intention are part of our spiritual toolbox on earth.
Absolutely. I mean, I loved that you brought up the theory that people float about that was the jump in consciousness from like early, I don't know what they would have been called, but pre-humans.
Like the Neanderthals or something. Like Homo erectus, Homo habilis, one of those.
Yes. But yeah, from that space into like the leap of consciousness that happened. I love that idea. And also that there has been this real demonizing of these things that has caused a lot of us to have a lot of fear and worry around them. And of course, you want to do your research and you want to have a healthy fear of changing your mind, and you want to be safe about these things. But yeah, I mean, in the 70s when LSD first kind of got discovered and was being experimented with, it was opening people's minds and having people think for themselves in a really expanded way. And then all of a sudden it got super demonized, and basically that all the trials they were doing got shut down. And I think a lot of that was about control and not wanting us to open our minds and connect in this way. So, I highly recommend a microdose to start out. It's a great way to dip a toe. And of course, be mindful, be smart, know where you're getting your substances from. But yeah, there's a lot of beauty that can be found in this connection. And I could go on and on. I mean, we could talk about this for the rest of the episode.
I know. I think the last thing I want to say about it is, if you're finding yourself in a really tough rut and it's hard to get out of it, this might be a supportive tool for you. And I think, like Claire was saying, just make sure that you're safe. I don't know the science on it. I don't know if different types of mental health conditions might not react well with different substances. So, but the last thing I want to say is I would really question anything that's super demonized. Like anything that's really demonized by organized religion, which is like basically these control systems over the masses that are super ancient. Anything that has been really demonized, judged, or patriarchal PR'd, just get curious about it. We're not saying you have to microdose. We're not saying you have to use these tools. But I was somebody who was not really into it or a believer. And it was there for me in the moment I really needed it in life. And it's kind of like that same idea of when you're ready, the teacher appears. So if you are ready for it, then maybe it will resonate with you in a way that makes you more curious and exploratory. And if you're not ready for it and it's not a medicine for you, you'll feel closed to it. So just follow your own intuition.
Yeah, absolutely. And know too, part of the lesson with it is showing you that the ability to change the channel of your mind, or to open your mind up to a new way of thinking, or walk through the door that it might show you or invite you to. All of that is available to you already. I think the substance is but a guidepost that can urge you in that direction or open you in that direction. So if you don't feel open to trying these things, it doesn't mean you don't have access to it. These things just show you that you have access to it and have had access to it all along.
Yes.
So I think just even the knowledge of that is really empowering. Like, I can shift my mindset. There's another way to look at this.
Yes.
There's another invitation in this moment where I can stop being in the story I'm spinning and be in laughter and lightness with the people I love. It's always available to me, and I can find it within myself with or without the substance.
Exactly. And that's where we just figure out what are your touchstones outside of the substance that can get you to that place, whether it's meditating on something you're grateful for, whether it's watching your favorite comedy movie, whether it's going outside and hugging a tree, whether it's breath work, whatever your touchstone is, absolutely correct. You have everything that this plant medicine brings out in you, you already had the capacity to experience, and there are other entry points as well. So let's move on to another question.
Okay, great. Maybe we'll have a plant expert or an expert like this come on sometime, and we can continue the conversation, because it is just so interesting and amazing.
I agree.
This question is from Kat. I've always been drawn to astrology, especially now that I have children. I really want to understand them and myself and my husband deeper, but don't know where to begin. I also feel presences, although I have always felt terrified, but now I feel open. What can the next step be?
Okay, so there's kind of two different questions in this. Your astrology question and the presences and the fear. So let's start with the astrology question. When it comes to our interpersonal relationships and astrology, you can get what's called a synastry reading, which is where they line up your birth charts with another person, and you can see kind of like the tests, the lessons, the gifts, what's harmonious, where there's tension. And that's how you can really understand how both of your charts relate to each other. That being said, I'm really hesitant when it comes to kids with over identifying with who their birth chart says they should be. And I feel like there's a need to let them grow into their birth chart. And astrology can be a really great tool for self-actualization, reflection. But before you've had the chance to discover and learn who you want to be, I just think there's a little bit of a danger of over pathologizing what our birth chart says. That being said, one of the key places I would look in your kids' birth charts is their moon sign. The moon is the connection with the mother, and it's also the connection with our inner world and our needs and our wants. And in a lot of ways, we are more our moon sign than our sun sign. Our sun sign is sort of the story we tell ourselves about who we are, but our moon sign is our inner world. And it's also what we've learned and found from our mother, who was literally our first world that we were in. And so I would look at what that moon sign needs, what element it's in, and how it can best get its needs and wants met. I would also look at their rising sign, because the first house, the rising sign that rules the first house, shows their childhood experience and sort of how they were in childhood. And so there's also a lot to be gleaned from sort of their authentic code in childhood and how they need to show up. And maybe you have a Cancer rising who's a little bit more clinging to their mother and shy and emotional and sensitive and cautious. And maybe they're in a family of fire signs that are like, let's go, let's go. And maybe they need to like feel a little bit more. Or maybe you have a kid who has a more cerebral air-like chart and they need to ask a million questions and they want to learn everything and they need to learn clear communication and they really need to feel heard. So I think the way that you can use a child's birth chart effectively is more to see how we can show up for them and how we can love them and how we can meet their needs. And there can be a lot of tools there instead of who are they growing up to be, because that's where it can become a little bit more constricting. And then with your husband's chart, really same thing. I think the moon sign is a really great place to focus. And then also the seventh house, which is your house of marriage and partnerships. Both of you will see what sign rules your seventh house and say, okay, so what are your needs in a marriage? How do you show up in a marriage? And how do I show up in a marriage? And where might there be conflicting things? Where might we need different things? Birth chart analysis is so in depth. These are just some little touch points to whet your appetite, if you will, but that's a good place to start. And then with I believe she said feeling presences, Claire, feeling them.
Yeah, she said, I also feel the presences. Although I have always felt terrified, but now I feel open. What can the next step be?
So this sounds a lot like my story of being really interested in astrology and also feeling presences. Clairsentience is my strongest psychic feeling, but I could never see them or hear them. I could just feel them, and I would get super freaked out because I couldn't combine my other senses to understand what was going on. I just felt watched, or I felt like someone was next to me, or I felt like someone was in the doorway. And so that can be very, very scary. For some reason, I'm also feeling intuitively pulled to this listener, like something with this being passed down on her mom's side, like something where there's an intuitive connection on her mom's side of the family. But that being said, it can be really scary to jump into the unknown. And as humans, we want to feel in control. We want to feel powerful. And when we think, oh, there's something out there unseen and maybe more powerful than me, which it's not, because this is a world designed for us in a physical body. But when we feel that way, it's easy to really close up. And so I think what it comes down to is creating energetic laws and containers. That's what really changed my whole life, was saying only beings of the highest good, integrity, and love are allowed in my auric field on this timeline and all others. And you have to, or you don't have to, but I recommend repeating that to yourself over and over and over until it becomes something that's so integrated with you. I remember I used to have nightmares, night terrors, and I would have these presences in my dreams, and I would always feel like there were ghosts in my house in my dreams, and there was always stuff like that. And I remember when I started working with these energetic laws, I remember the first night that the same nightmare was coming up, and I said the law in my dream. Like even dream me was like, oh no, this breaks my energetic law. You're not welcome here. And I have never had a dream like that again. So I think there's something about like it will take time, and there's an element of faking it till you make it. My other recommendation is also when you feel something and it scares you to just start laughing, because my belief is that spirit is all love. I think humans are the ones with the capacity to go to darker, more evil places when we are here on earth. And I think spirit is all love, but we can project a lot of fear onto the unknown. That's my personal belief. But when you feel something and it triggers fear in you, and it can feel so visceral because it can be a survival instinct. Like, what is this presence I'm feeling? Am I prey? It's triggering fear in me, and it can be a very visceral fear, and it can take us out of our logical mind. Kind of in the same way we're so scared of spiders. Like, what is a spider going to do? We're a million times bigger than it. It's like kind of a similar fear response, but it's so real when you're in the throes of it. So I don't know if this would work for spiders, but for spiritual experiences that scare you, just start laughing and it automatically shifts the energy. Even if you start out fake laughing, you'll eventually start real laughing because it is just ridiculous. And then it will shift the energy and the spell will kind of be broken. And so set those energetic laws in containers. And there's also something to be said for just almost this confronting it head on. Instead of letting it have the power, the fear have the power. This might be another area where the inner villain voice is directing your consciousness in a drill sergeant way to wake you up and connect you to a more powerful consciousness. So just my example is when I was in my old apartment and I was in the height of fear and disconnection from my gifts and felt presences in my house and felt really plagued and didn't know what to do. Every night there would be a rattling in my coat closet every single night. And one night I was just so sleep deprived and over it that I got out of my bed and I just shut myself in the dark in the coat closet. And I said, the scariest thing in this apartment is me. And it never happened again. And so again, there's something here of just remembering your power. And the more, I always say this about ghosts. I always say ghosts are powered by our belief in them. And I'm not speaking about spirits. I'm speaking about like, I don't know exactly how it works. I'm not an expert in it, but like physical manifestations or imprints or something there that can be tied to specific locations. And I believe it's powered up by our fear and our belief in it. And if you notice, people who don't believe in ghosts never see ghosts. People who believe in ghosts are like, I just saw a ghost and this crazy thing happened for me. And so what does that tell you? They're manifestations of our fear or what we believe to be true. And we're powerful manifestors and we're looking for evidence of it. So as soon as you say, oh, actually, I'm programming my manifestation to say I'm the most powerful presence at all times spiritually, wherever I am, you will integrate that and it will change everything. And you'll be able to connect in a more empowered way, a more love-filled way, a more productive way. And I always say that getting over the initial fear, which is a really common experience from everyone I've spoken to at least, getting over that fear is almost a part of the reclamation process. It's almost a prerequisite. Like, can you walk through the underworld? Because these gifts have been demonized for so many generations that, of course, on some level or another, there is going to be a fearful attachment to it. So can you walk through that and reclaim the light? And if so, that's almost a prerequisite to do the work and stand in your power, which is very interesting because I believe I've said this before, that in the spiritualist community, they call meditation sitting in the power. And it's important to sit in the power because to be a voice for spirit, you need to be powerful. If you're afraid or someone says, no, that's not, like in a reading I had, someone's dad was coming through and telling me he was deaf in his right ear. And his daughter was like, no, it was his left. And I was like, I'm sorry, but he's telling me it was his right. And she said, no, it was his left. I said, okay, well, he's saying right. So let's move on. We kept going. And then she said, oh my gosh, it was his right. I had to whisper into his left. And I was thinking it was his left, but it was his right. I just remembered. That's just a silly example. But if we cave on everything that people around us say, we are not in our power and we are not strong messengers for spirit. We have to trust what's coming through. We have to trust ourselves and we have to be in a certain place of power to not try to people please for everyone we're trying to give the message for. And so that's where I think the getting over the initial fear is a really powerful initiation into our most powerful self. And I know the spiritualist community says sitting in the power, but I think the evolution of that is walking in the power, where we don't have to just be sitting in the power, but instead everything we do outside of that sacred container is spirit led, is the part of ourselves that remembers we are spirit leading the way. And I think that's the next evolution. I've never spoken about that publicly, but it's something my guides speak to me about how it's not enough in this world to sit in the power. We have to walk in the power.
Wow. I love that so much. And you have actually really helped me with this. I have struggled being a somewhat fearful person, especially growing up. And I was always someone who was like, if ghosts are real, I don't want to know. Don't show up. Like, if you're real, don't show yourself. Like, because I was just too scared to hold that. And you shared with me this idea to say, when you're feeling that fear, I am the most powerful being in this space. And I do that all the time. First I started doing it just to like a safety blanket, but I think the repetition of it really has led me to recognize my power. And I had a beautiful download last night where I'm just having a lot of stuff come up in a difficult situation and a lot of things I'm trying to examine. And one of the main things I'm examining is a lot of these limiting beliefs that I feel like our world and our society has instilled within me about making me feel powerless. And I just had a beautiful download last night where I realized, what if I recognized the unbelievable power that I actually am? What if I embraced and recognized that I am powerful beyond measure, and that these ideas that I am somehow weak or at the whim of these stereotypes or ideas is just something that I have been told, and I no longer need to attach myself to it. And I think we can apply that in so many ways to every part of our life, but just made me think of this idea of really standing in our power in all the ways that we walk through this world.
Yes, it's so important. And I love that synchronicity. And it's like, well, we've seen the alternative. We see what not standing in our power has led us. So what if we just say F it and stand in our power? Nobody outside of ourselves knows what we need. Nobody outside of ourselves knows our truth. And if we are not in our power, how can we service our soul? How can we? We will continually be in a place of self-sacrifice, which my definition for that, as I've said, is the ignorance of intuition, the purposeful ignorance of intuition. And so if we aren't walking in our power, what are we walking in besides self-sacrifice? And I think that the witch wound tells us it's not safe to be powerful. The witch wound says it's not safe to be powerful. It's not safe to be inconvenient. It's not safe to shine too bright. And we've seen the alternative. It's not safe to not do those things either. So you might as well do them.
Yes, 100%. I think the messaging there has been to keep us small, to be able to control us, and particularly women,
Mm-hmm.
And I no longer want to sign up for that way of thinking and feeling. And I think I have internalized this idea that I'm weak or that I'm unwanted by this world. As a woman, I feel like that was the message that I was given, that kind of, no thanks. Who cares that you're this brilliant, beautiful light? We don't want it. And what a painful wound that has been. And really recognizing that last night and deciding, that's an energetic law right there, where I will no longer agree with that message. That is not how I define myself or see myself. And instead agreeing with the idea that I am powerful beyond measure. And I just loved so much what you said about not just sitting in the power, but choosing to walk with it, choosing to let that be a part of our experience at every turn. Because similar to what we were saying with at the top of the episode, and also with the invitation of like a substance like psilocybin, that is a possibility for us that is open and available to us and only needs our decision to choose it.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think we're in a moment now where the sitting in the power to walking to the power transition is very relevant. because it's not enough to be spiritual on our yoga mat and in our meditation chair and in our office behind closed doors. We need a integration of these spiritual concepts in the day-to-day micro moments in our world, within our families, within our jobs, within our communities. The spiritual can't just be something for self-work, even though that's a beautiful entry point. It needs to be spread in this woven tapestry in an integrated way with humanity and life on earth. And so I think that's where walking in the power takes it to the next level, because you can read all of the self-help books, you can meditate, you can say mantras to yourself, but are you actually living by that and walking the walk, not just sitting in that knowledge, but walking in it in a way that brings it into the physical in your life? Are you taking aligned action steps with that, taking it out of the cerebral and esoteric and physicalizing it into your life? And this feels like a 3-phase shift in consciousness. First, it's sitting in the power, then it's walking in the power, and eventually we will dance with the power. And when we dance with the power, like, for anybody out there like Claire, who's a good dancer, you don't have to think twice about it. Walking is like this baby's kind of learning to step, learning to walk. Let's go until you can start to walk a little faster and be in this space. But dancing, the steps. You're responding to the power. You're let go in this sort of almost trance-like state. And that's the next evolution of consciousness. And I don't know if it will happen in my time. I'm just trying to walk in the power.
I'm trying to dance in the power. That sounds amazing.
I know. I'm like, ooh, I'm ready for that, guides. But collectively, we're in this place of walking in the power now.
I think the idea too of dancing, it's such a beautiful expression of the human experience. It's like our body, our spirit is letting loose and rejoicing in such a free, abandoned way. It's such a gift to be able to dance and connect with music. And Taylor and I do these beach discos.
Yes.
Where we do a silent disco on the beach as the sun sets, and we dance with abandon in the surf. And
oh, it's so amazing.
We'll go to the beach and let the ocean take our pain and fill us up. And I highly recommend that if you've never done it.
Yes. And yeah, dancing is so beautiful because it allows us to get out of our own way. It allows our body to fully take over in a way that our mind is like, okay, I'm letting this happen. Like the mind kind of takes a backseat and the body and heart take over and the soul takes over. And so like walking in the power is kind of this balanced place of like mind, body, soul. When you're walking, you're kind of like everything is firing off at once. And when you're dancing, you're just so heart-led in this safe way. It's like the ultimate act of abandon and joy and self-expression.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, well, this has been such a nice conversation. I love these questions, and keep them coming, my loves, because I love answering them so, so much. So let's transition to sitting with spirit. Welcome to Sitting with Spirit, where I sit with spirit and then relay the messages that came through for you guys. Remember, a lot of people are listening to this. Don't make it fit if it doesn't. There might be postcards from your past loved ones, which are basically synchronicities and little winks from them. But use this as an opportunity in spiritual discernment. If it resonates with you, it's for you. And if it doesn't, it's not. And that's totally fine. And maybe parts will resonate. So I actually connected with a really beautiful male past loved one. It feels like there was a really big connection with music with him. And I was seeing some sort of brass instrument, and I think it was a saxophone. And I felt a connection to jazz and this feeling of music being really important. But what was really interesting is I also felt a hearing loss problem with him in one ear. So I found it really interesting with that juxtaposition of the hearing loss, but also living for jazz, living for music. And I felt a really positive energy on the surface, but I also felt like this person might have had some lower self-esteem or felt kind of small sometimes. And music is what brought this person out of their shell or made them feel seen or brought them joy. And there was a really big connection there with music. I also saw this person for some reason showing me throwing darts. And I felt like there might have been a memory, either throwing darts or in an environment with darts or something like that. I also felt like this person would have taken really good care of themselves, like taken the time to smell good and be clean shaven and really care about how they were presenting themselves. I felt an I love you from this person, and I got the feeling like there might not have been that for a goodbye, and that was a really important part of the message. I was also seeing swan as a symbol around this person, and swan is my symbol for like a late bloomer type of energy. I also got that this person would have been pretty sensitive, empathetic, and I was seeing the Cancer symbol, which is the zodiac sign, not the Cancer ribbon that I see when they pass from Cancer, but the zodiac sign of Cancer. I was seeing that around this person as well. And then he was actually with a bulldog in spirit. I saw like this like little, it could have been a pug, but some type of like wrinkly dog. And I think it was a bulldog. And so he was coming through and he felt very close, and it feels like he passed younger, definitely didn't make it to old age. And I feel like there is a message from him to the collective of, if you focus on the problems will grow. And if you focus on the solutions will grow. And I feel like he was very particular about not being able to hear in one ear and not letting it stop him from doing what he loved to do. And so there's a message from this spirit of, if you're feeling small or less than, if you're kind of shrunken into yourself, and if you're only focused on what you're no good at or what isn't working or what you don't think is possible, you're robbing yourself, because you have one ear that works in his case. And so there is something here about focusing on the positivity, focusing on what's possible, focusing on what is in your control, because life is too short, and do what you want to do is basically this spirit's message. And focus on the parts that are working and keep feeding that. Kind of reminds me of this message that I got when I was healing my PCOS, which was, why are you co-creating with illness? Co-create with health. And so where are we expecting to fail? Where are we expecting to feel bad? Where are we designing our life around this constricted feeling? And how can we shatter and break down the walls into more of an expanded feeling? And that's what this spirit is saying, that basically, if I could do it, if I could be in music, why can't you do your thing? Because there's always going to be an excuse, but there's also always going to be a reason why you should follow your heart. So that's the message there. Very sweet, very, very, very sweet. Feels like a young soul to me. Feels like a, not in terms of being an old soul or a young soul, but I mean actual age of his passing feels young. And so when I was feeling in before this spirit came through, I felt collective crown chakra blocks. And it's interesting because in the crown chakra, I mean, 99% of people have crown chakra blocks. We're just in a society that's basically designed for us to be in our heads at all time. Kind of going back to that message about, like, you know, microdosing mushrooms taking you back to the present and your body and other people and out of your head and screens and analytical things. And so what they were showing me is that there's different sides of the crown chakra, and I felt it mostly on the left side. So the left side is the side of receiving. It's where our angels and guides can like drop in downloads and we get ideas. And I felt a block there. I felt stagnant and stuck and uninspired, and like the new wasn't coming in. And so basically the message is, when the left side is blocked, go to the side that isn't blocked, the right. And the right is the side of release and letting go. So we might be really clear on what needs to go. And where are we just trying to battle our own mind to be like, well, what's next? And trying to think about what's next and filling in that space, but it's not coming through. So focus on the other side of your crown and really commit to what you know needs cord cutting, what you know needs release, because so often with intuitive connection, we try to force the answer that we want to come through, but that's not the answer that you're ready for. The answer you have right in front of you is what isn't working. So move forward with that and let go of that. And that will then create space for the left side to be unblocked and the new to resonate with you. Because if you get the intuitive message of what's filling the space before you're in the place to receive it, it won't resonate with you anyway. So focus on what needs to go, what needs to be released, and have faith that the space will be filled. I also was seeing the sign of the crossroads. So I think a lot of people people are in between moments, up-level moments, moments of change. Keep in mind, I'm recording this back in Taurus season. Who knows when you'll click on this episode or when you'll be listening to it. But I do see an important crossroads moment. And that can be a big thing like a home change or a home renovation. That can be a big thing like a job or a relationship. But it can also be a more subtle thing in terms of a new energetic way we show up, or a way that we're going to filter all of our experiences through a new energetic law or container. And so I see a lot of us in this energetic crossroads. It can manifest in a lot of different ways, but basically we just can't go backwards. We have to go forwards. And I saw a mountain as a symbol. And when I see mountains, it shows that it's time for a new goal, a new mountain to climb, a new goal, setting our sights on something new that we can make strategies for and climb step by step by step up the mountain until we reach the summit. And so the beautiful thing about a mountain is that each step up is a new perspective. And I love that so much because it's not like we set the goal and then everything is stagnant on the way there. We're constantly switching perspectives, seeing from new vantage points, learning things. Like the mountain and the journey itself is what our soul needs, not even necessarily what's at the top. And so I see something here about a new mountain, a new goal, and not being afraid to pick a big one. Take a page out of some Capricorn's books. Every goal can be broken down into a series of manageable steps. And piggybacking off of that crown chakra block I was feeling, we can get really overwhelmed. And what that spirit was saying, we can only focus on the no's, the reason it can't work, the victim consciousness, and the problems. But every goal that you want can be broken down into solutions, strategies, action steps, and little baby climbs up. And that's all you have to do is just keep climbing, keep climbing, keep climbing. And the act of the climb, it's like, yeah, from the bottom, I mean, I'm not a rock climber, but from the bottom, I'm sure you might not see the exact path up, but you have a new vantage point when you're 3 or 4 steps up the mountain. You might see the 5th in a way you didn't when you were at the bottom. So just take the steps up and trust that the next one will pop out when it's ready to. But if you never take the step, you'll never see the 5th or the 6th or the 7th step, and it will seem unmanageable. But if other people are doing it, so can you. There is a pathway. Commit to the climb. And that's what I'm going to leave you with, my loves. Have a beautiful, beautiful week. And it was so, so nice to connect.
For more information on Taylor and her work, go to angelsandamethyst.com or connect with her on Instagram at angels_and_amethyst. She is the one verified account with this name and will never DM you for a reading. If you have any questions about intuition, spirituality, angels, or anything and everything magical, please email contact@magichourpod.com. We will answer listener questions once a month in our solo episodes. Are you an aligned business owner that would like to advertise to our beautiful hummingbird community? Please email contact@magichourpod.com. Make sure you're subscribing to Magic Hour so you never miss the magic. And don't forget to leave us 5 sparkling star reviews. They help more magical people find the pod. Please screenshot and email your 5-star reviews to contact@magichourpod.com. And we will send you a free downloadable angelic meditation and enter you to win an angel reading with Taylor Page. The next giveaway will happen when we hit 111 5-star reviews.
Thank you for listening to Magic Hour with Taylor Page.